Hi everybody and welcome back to Lost Genre Reddit Stories. This post is from the subreddit Am I the A-hole and it's by user Cosmic Echoes 44. I didn't invite my father to my wedding because years ago he told me I was no longer part of his family. I'm 28 female and will be getting married next month. I didn't invite my father to the wedding, but now he's trying to get in touch. I think I need to explain the context because it all started when I was 6 years old, when my parents got divorced after my dad cheated on my mom with my stepmother. After that, I spent most of my time with my mom, but during holidays and vacations, I stayed with my dad. When I was 8, my half-brother Jake, 20 male, was born, and whenever I was with my dad, I was forced to take care of him. When I started high school, I had to move in with my dad because my mom had to move abroad for work. This period was one of the hardest of my life. My stepmother wasn't a bad person. She tried to include me in things, but she was very submissive to my father. As for my dad, he always treated me like an extra in the house, someone who didn't really belong there. I was constantly responsible for taking care of Jake, and whenever he went out, he would only take my stepmother and Jake, never inviting me. One of the most painful experiences happened when I was 14. My dad announced that the whole family was going to Disney for vacation, but the day before the trip, he told me that he wanted it to be a family moment, their first big trip with Jake, so I was left home alone. This had already become a pattern. Trips to the beach, zoos, or other outings always included just my stepmother and Jake while I was left behind. My dad also didn't like me going out with friends or inviting them over. He said teenagers together only cause trouble, and because he was controlling, he would call the house phone at random times to check if I was home. He also had a trusted neighbor who would keep an eye on me to make sure I didn't have any visitors. When I turned 16, living with him, the feeling of being an extra only got worse. Everything I had experienced during vacations, the exclusion and sense of abandonment, became a part of my daily life. Things came to a head when I turned 18. My dad got a promotion at work and decided to take a family trip to Europe. Since it was my last year of high school, I was excited, thinking I'd finally be included. But then he told me he didn't have enough money for a trip for 4, so it would just be to celebrate Jake's 10th birthday. I had to stay home. That's when I snapped. I told him he was being unfair and that he shouldn't have given me false hope. I explained how I'd felt over the past years, and he called me ungrateful and spoiled, saying that I lived with him rent-free, which was a lie since my mom sent money to support me and I did all the housework because he and my stepmother worked late. The argument escalated and he kicked me out of the house, saying I was no longer part of the family and not even his daughter. He literally threw me out and tossed my things onto the sidewalk. Luckily, a friend lived nearby and I stayed at her place that night. The next day, I went back to see if my dad had calmed down, but I found my things still on the sidewalk and some even in the trash. My stepmother had kindly saved a few items for me and handed them over. After that, my dad never reached out except to call and yell at me a month later when my mom stopped sending him money for my expenses. A few months later, I got into an engineering program in another state where I met my now fiancé, Mark, 29 male. He was a senior and we soon connected, realizing we had a lot in common. We started dating, graduated, and now work in the same field, though at different companies. A few months ago, Mark proposed and I happily said yes. I have social media, but I rarely use it. I've had Instagram for about 6 years, but haven't even posted 10 pictures. I think one of my relatives must have told my dad about the wedding because about a month after I accepted the proposal, he reached out to me through Instagram, saying he was excited to help with the wedding. I was surprised, both that he had messaged me and that he genuinely thought he would walk me down the aisle. I responded saying he wouldn't be walking me down the aisle because my stepfather would, and that the wedding would be small, just for my close family. After that, I blocked him. After blocking him and inspired by reading Reddit stories, I expected calls, messages, and even letters full of insults like ungrateful or spoiled. However, the only thing I received was a letter delivered by Jake. Yes, we still have contact. In the letter, my father expressed how sorry he was. I won't copy the exact words, but to summarize, he said that after kicking me out, he lived a normal life with my stepmother and Jake, but when he saw pictures of my graduation with my mom and stepfather, he started feeling regret. He wanted to talk to me, but his pride held him back. He only decided to reach out now because he realized that his pride got him nowhere and that he wanted to fulfill one of the plans he made when I was born, to pay for my wedding and walk me down the aisle. Honestly, I don't know what to do. I've moved on with my life, and his attempt at redemption after so many years feels a bit too convenient. Am I the a-hole for not wanting to include my dad in my wedding despite his apology? Note, my stepfather is an amazing person. He always goes out of his way to include me in everything, and my stepsisters are wonderful as well. When he found out my father hadn't taken me to Disney, he planned a trip for the next holiday and took me, along with my mother and sisters. This and 1,000 other reasons are why I want to walk down the aisle with him. Willoughby, I'm not really sure he apologized. I mean, all you told us is that he was sorry and that he had regrets. But he did not apologize for casting you aside, for making you feel lesser than, and for actually kicking you out of the family and telling you that you weren't a part of his family. And now he's back because he wants to be a dad? F him. No, OP. Your stepfather sounds amazing. He's your dad. So no, I don't think you would be the a-hole if you told him, you know what? You're not a part of my family. And you should tell Jake that you don't want any more letters from him and keep him blocked. And what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section, and now let's check out the community comments. Turmeric Ping says, not the a-hole. Your bio-father's regrets are his problem, not yours. Your real father, your stepfather, the man who treated you as a father should, is the one who should walk you down the aisle. That other guy is just a bad memory to put behind you. Cutie Casey says, you're absolutely not the a-hole. Your dad made his choices and completely shut you out for years, treating you like an outsider in his own family. Now that he wants to play the dad card because you're getting married, it feels more like a convenient afterthought than genuine remorse. You've built a loving and supporting family with your mom and stepfather who actually care about you. It's totally valid to want them by your side on such a significant day. Your happiness matters, and you deserve to celebrate with those who truly appreciate you. And new number 7810 says, not the a-hole. The way your sperm donor treated you was vile, and he does not deserve a second chance. He's only reaching out now because of his pride. He wants an honor reserved for fathers, even though he didn't act as one. Quote, my stepmother wasn't a bad person. End quote. She was a bad person. She slept with a married man, remarried to him after she helped blow up his first marriage, and turned a blind eye while he abused his daughter for years. Quote, my stepfather is an amazing person. End quote. You should ask him if he'd be willing to adopt you. And Opie responds, my stepmother tried to defend me and even called me a few times for trips, but her weakness was that she didn't have the authority to go against my donor. I wrote stepfather here just to make it easier to differentiate between the two. In real life, I call him dad. Regarding my adoption, in my country, it can only happen with the consent of both the father, if the child is a minor, and the mother, and I haven't discussed this. This is because right after the events, I was going to start college and would have to change all the documentation, which could cause issues with my registration. In the documents and registration forms, it is necessary to fill in the names of both the mother and the father, just as they appear on the identification document. But now I'm thinking about it. Thanks for reminding me of this. OP's edit. People are asking why my mom and stepfather left me with my dad and what their jobs are. My mom works as a programmer and managed to get a job abroad. She thought it was best to accept it, especially since she wanted to save up a good amount of money to cover college expenses and for the future. My stepfather is a researcher and was doing his postdoctoral work at the time. The first person to talk to me was my older sister, stepsister, 2 days after I was kicked out. She came to see me and even stayed for a few days, which I can barely remember because I was just crying. But I didn't move in with her because she lives in another state and I was almost done with classes and final exams. So my friend and bridesmaid let me stay at her house. Her parents helped me gather my things and even set up the guest room for me. Well, the community agrees that OP wouldn't be the a-hole to cut the bio dad out and just walk down the aisle with the stepdad, which clearly is the better and suited man for the role. So now, let's move on to the update to see how this story ends. I want to thank everyone for helping me see things I hadn't noticed before, especially in how my dad's letter was written. For those wondering, yes, he mostly talked about his feelings and how he felt. Very little was said about me. And even less was about apologizing. He also mentioned how I'm his only daughter, while my stepfather has 2 daughters to walk down the aisle, but he only has me. For those asking why I didn't move abroad with my mom and stepfather, they were supposed to be away for 3 to 5 years, with my mom likely needing to change companies every year. My stepfather was also deep in his research, so their lives were pretty unstable. At the time, I didn't anticipate how much I'd suffer or that I'd be kicked out. I think the rare times I spent with my dad and the feeling of being left behind would fade whenever I was with my mom and stepfather. This cycle became my routine, which is why I stayed with my sperm donor. And for those asking if my mom knew what was going on, I told her about the Disney incident. I didn't want to bring issues from one home into another. Now for the update. For some background on my mom. She returned 2 years after I started college, and my real dad came back a year after that. It was my sisters who attended my high school graduation. My mom now lives 2 hours away. I went to visit her to discuss what had happened and to get her and my stepfather's thoughts on the situation. My mom said it was something I had to decide on my own and that she wouldn't interfere. My stepfather told me he'd help pay for the wedding regardless of what I chose to do. Yes, he's helping with some expenses. My sisters, on the other hand, share the opinion as most of you, not to invite him and to send him a letter detailing everything I went through. My older sister, let's call her Lisa, was the most against inviting him. Lisa was the first person to check on me. Today, I learned that on the same day she came to see me at my friend's house, she also stopped to talk to my dad. She hadn't mentioned it before because, according to her, he only spouted nonsense, and sharing it at the time would have just made things worse for me. That's why she's completely against me reconnecting with him. For those curious about what he said, she didn't go into details, but mentioned that it angered her so much she ended up shouting at him, calling him every name under the sun. She thinks this may be one of the reasons he didn't reach out sooner. She thinks that added fuel to the fire. We talked a lot, not just about my dad, but about myself as well. I realized that even with the therapy I went through during college, there was something important I hadn't done. I never truly opened up to my parents. I always thought I had to face and overcome everything alone. All I did though was bottle everything up. Today, I was finally able to unpack it all and share my feelings. After a lot of tears, I hugged them both, and here's what I've decided. I will respond to his letter. Unfortunately for Mark and Lisa, it won't be the harsh response they were hoping for. I'll take some of your advice and express how I felt when he kicked me out. I'll be polite but honest. I'll also let him know that my stepfather will walk me down the aisle because that's what I want. I won't offer further explanations to him. After all, this is my wedding with Mark, and it will be exactly how we want it, without the need for justifications. I will not accept any money from him, nor will I send him an invitation. If my dad truly wants to reconcile, he can reach out to me through Jake, but only after the wedding or honeymoon, and it will be on my terms. As someone suggested, we're going to hire security for the wedding, no matter how my dad reacts. For those wondering, yes, Jake has been invited. As I mentioned, we still have a good relationship, and he's allowed to take photos. Well, OP, you're doing what you want for yourself. I think that's the mature thing, and you're telling your dad to back off in a very polite way, which I commend you for. So hopefully everything goes well with your wedding and honeymoon. Take care, OP, and thanks so much for sharing. Now, let's finish this video with a mood booster post. This post is from the subreddit Malicious Compliance and it's by user Warm Kitten. Professor demands we stick to schedule, we stick to schedule. This was last year. In hindsight, I feel a little bad for the professor. He wasn't the worst I'd ever had, and he was up against a university which was in turmoil behind the scenes and spearheading an untested new course. That being said, I am paying quite exorbitantly for this education, and he was a right snot about this, so It was a history course, and one of the assignments was a group project wherein we presented in front of the class. There was a 3-hour seminar taking place in a lecture hall, the last hour of which was reserved for 2 groups to go up and present at a half-hour apiece. This would involve a Q&A session afterwards, just to keep us on our toes, I suppose. Professor really emphasized that we pick the weekend topic we're going to present in, and that's that. It's first come, first serve, and if you miss your spot, you get a 0. Thought nothing of it at the time, seemed fair. Didn't like his attitude, but whatever, right? Well, I won the lottery with the group I was assigned. They were grand lads and a dream to work with. We decided on an advantageous week to present, given our schedules, and we spent the run-up fine-tuning this presentation and really getting it to work. We used a stopwatch and everything. We even brought in outsiders to ask questions we might not predict. All was well, except we were presenting in week 5. And a disturbing pattern had emerged during the seminars in week 2, 3, and 4. For all his talk about keeping things constrained and everyone working within a schedule, whoever went second was screwed. The first group always ran long and the second group had to make do with at most 20 minutes. You could see the stress on their faces. So come week 5, the rest of my group, a little bit more nervous than I am, worries aloud about whether all of our careful planning will be for pot. I decided to throw a Hail Mary, thinking that the worst I could get is a no, right? So I got up right before class starts and asked the professor what are the odds we might go on first out of the 2. After all, we're sure we have this down to 30 minutes. The dude proceeds to rake me across the coals in front of everyone. It was a normal speaking voice, but the podium was right by the door and people were filing in. He tells me not to ask such a stupid question and go back to my seat. I go back, tail between my legs, pissed off, and sit with steam shooting out of my ears for the next 2 hours. Sure enough, the other group goes first, and sure enough, they run long. We shoot concerned looks to the professor, who is too busy watching the other group to notice. Come 50 minutes in and the first group is just about wrapping up. The guys in my group are silently freaking out about this. Nightmare, right? That's when the professor stands up, polite applause all around and says, "Well, I guess we're finishing early today, huh?" Like a scene out of a courtroom drama, the 4 of us stand up like a shot and ask, what the hell is going on? He can't quite hear us from back and we're all talking at once, so he asks, what's going on? I charge down those steps like King Kong, in the same tone of voice, in front of the same door that people were now filing out of. I tell this guy that we're booked for the assignment today and we have something prepared. What? Turns out he totally plumb forgot that we were presenting today, and that's why he was so mad at my suggestion earlier. So I tell him we're presenting now to an empty room or he's giving us 100. The poor guy sure did try. He insisted we hadn't signed up this week. We had. Insisted that he could schedule us in next week, even assuming 2 out of 4 of our group weren't away on placement for their teaching degree. We booked for this week as ordered. Insisted that he had somewhere to be. Not my problem, mate. Dude just had to wear it. After making a phone call to, presumably, his next appointment, he had to stand there, white as a sheet, and wear it. I'll never forget the look on his face. So we presented to a lecture hall empty of all but the professor and 2 students who, I guess, wanted to see more of the show. We got a great grade to boot. Nicely done, OP. If he forgot you guys were scheduled or he had a mishap, that's not your problem. You guys prepared for that date and you rocked it. Congratulations on getting an awesome grade. Take care, OP, and thanks for sharing. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. Now, if you've gotten to this point in the video, I assume that you like these stories that I'm reading out, so here are a couple more that you might enjoy. And if you don't have any time to watch another story right now, save it for later, and also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.